welcome back to another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. I'm Crystal with JoJo and Maverick. So today we're going to dive in with some summer gaming announcements. Maverick or Joe, do either of you want to kick us off with one of the games coming out?
I think my brother has the list in front of him, so
I
let him
do,
take that
so
one.
I'll go ahead and field it. So I don't think these are coming out right now, but they were announced in summer.
Yes.
You know, it's July and hurricane season, missed birthdays and all that. So summer gaming announcements, we have Civ 7 that was announced, and I read a couple articles about people theorizing how can Civ 7 change the end game of the Civilization series? Like, how do you win? I don't know if you've ever played Civ 7, Civ 6 or before, but they all kind of play similarly. So the end game might change when that comes out. There's not too much news other than it's exciting to hear about it for fans of the franchise. Similarly, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was announced. I never played it, but I did read a little bit about how it's going to introduce more options on like the character you can play. I think they are introducing more customization, whether it be race or otherwise. And there were a slew of other things they announced with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 versus 1. And then the other one, the third one that we have that was announced recently is Monster Hunter Wilds, which is a wildly popular series. Monster Hunter has all sorts of sub-franchises. And so Monster Hunter Wilds was also announced recently. I think all of these are coming out in 2025. I'm not positive.
I know for sure the Monster Hunter Wilds one is. It'll be out in 2025. I was just looking at their website and it looks really good. So I'm excited for that one.
And
Kingdom Come Deliverance looks like it's another first-person battle type game.
yeah, it's got like a medieval fantasy vibe to it from when I looked at it.
But it
Again,
does
I didn't
say
play the
2024.
Oh, so maybe it'll be out soon. I gotta do better research.
I can double check
One of the reasons I wanted to talk about these that were announced is not only because they were recently announced and fans of the series are going to be happy about it, but it reminded me of this notion of when I hear about a series that I'm really invested in its new iteration. So a longstanding one for me would be the Disgaea series. And it's a comedy TRPG, which is a weird thing to say because most tactical RPGs are pretty serious, and Disgaea goes off the deep end with tropes and ridiculousness. What about you guys? Do you guys have long-running series that you're invested in that, like, when you hear an announcement, you're like, yeah, looking forward to that?
Well, I can cycle back to one that was relatively recent, which was the announcement for Gears of War and their newer one. And it's going to be kind of a prequel to the game, to where it was going, which I'm excited about because a lot of the times, and I'm going to use another title as an example too, is Halo. Is as you get these new versions of it, it could be because they changed studios, it could be a lot of different things, but I think sometimes they deviate so far like off of the original, what drew everybody in.
Yeah,
it kind of backfires on them. And I think Gears of War tried to like spread out way too much to the point where they even had a tactical RPG type game where it was movement based, where you had to use a strategy to beat and it felt weird because it was cool because I've played those games when I was younger, so it wasn't too much of a shock for me because again they did the same thing with Halo, where you had these, I think it was called Halo Wars. So you had these tactical versions of them, but considering what the original game was like, it felt a little weird why they would even try to do that, or kind of a cash grab.
It's so funny. I was about to say, I call it the cash cow syndrome. So Kingdom Hearts, Halo, Final Fantasy 15, specifically that one especially, seven to an extent as well. I was really sad when it was happening to Kingdom Hearts because, well, I'm skipping ahead to the topic that I knew I would bait us all in, which is it always good when your favorite series has expansions and stuff, especially if it changes genre, right? We'll circle back, but let's let Crystal chime in with one of hers.
I honestly don't think I really have anything. Um, I mean, I've played like Final Fantasy 14 for
I think that
7
it kind of
years.
saved you in a way because you didn't play the original types of the game. For
Mm,
example, like Final Fantasy VII, which as kids we played it. So to play that version of it would be kind of a culture shock to you if you didn't expect it. If
Oh,
you're
11.
expecting it to be the original type of thing, and
Yeah.
then you go on, and you're like, "Am I playing World of Warcraft? What am I playing?"
I think
Mm-hmm.
like growing up, I played games like, Donkey Kong or Spyro. And I remember when Spyro and Crash Bandicoot announced that they were going to be doing like a remake of their games. So I was really excited for that. But I don't have any long standing, yeah, that I still play. Because I was like, Call of Duty, I used to play that a lot when I was younger. But no, I do not get excited when I hear Call of Duty anymore.
So the question is, why not?
Well, um,
She's trying to be
so
PC about it. I can see it in her head. She's like, how do I say this? And not...
they went from being like fantastic story driven games to now they're all about their battle royale, and their battle royale is not my favorite.
I see. So I think that actually gets to the heart of the question that I wanted to ask everybody, us three, of course, and the listeners. You know, what makes it so that you're not excited about a new entry into the series that you like? And Crystal, you said I don't look forward to any of them, but it sounds more like you would, but you stopped because
Yeah.
of changes you didn't like that
Yeah,
became the norm.
I mean it's not, I have a very high threshold of like putting up with things I don't like. Um like I could watch a terrible movie from start to finish and
I can't.
happily watch it,
I can't
okay?
do it.
That's a little tough.
But when it comes to gaming, like it takes multiple iterations of that same thing that I do not like before I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna put this down now.
She eats the whole plate if she doesn't like something. She like takes a bite and be like, I don't know if I really liked it. She takes another
Oh,
bite and she's like, I'm still not sure what I don't like. And then she's like halfway through her dish and she's like, I definitely didn't like that.
The
I'll
funny
never
thing
order
is,
this again.
Yeah.
the funny thing is that I know you made a food comparison, but if it was food, I would never even touch it again. But with entertainment, specifically with video games and animes and movies, I feel like I have to give it a shot just because the change is so drastic at first. I know that, you know, like typical whatever, like normal. A lot of people don't like change, especially when it comes to their favorite games. I know, Maverick, you didn't like, what was it, Disgaea 5 or 6?
Yes.
Because it was such a
6.
drastic change in the game, and he was like, oh, I don't like this. And then he played it and kept playing it. And then the next one came out, and that same thing he didn't like was in the next one as
Mm-hmm.
well, but they made it better. So, like, you got to give it a chance, is how I feel, because sometimes it does work out.
To play devil's advocate, I think there's going to be two categories of people that, in their stance about their favorite whatever genre series. Category 1, the simple one, is I liked it. Don't change it because I like it. It's perfect. Stop it. Aside from graphical updates, even then, the 2D to 3D, which is what happened with Disgaea that you just mentioned, I hated it. I hated the change to 3D. That being said, for the most part, if you absolutely love something, it's going to be much easier to destroy or mess up something that's nigh perfect in your mind than it is to make it better. It's very hard to make anything better that you already perceive as wonderful. The second category of person is going to say something like, well, change is good, right? It's stale. I don't want to play the same game with a different title, right? I don't want to play FIFA 18 or FIFA 19 or FIFA 20, right? Like it's still the same game. And a lot of people feel that's especially so when it's not a sports game. Sports makes sense, right? The sport's still the same. The players change.
Yeah.
For every other game genre, you don't want to just play the exact same game because you would just replay your old one. And so those are the two categories of people I see as like reasonable. I mean, number two is obviously wrong. Screw those people. But they're both logical.
Yeah.
I would like to point one thing out though when it comes to iterations of games or changes of games. It's that I think there's two types of changes that could bother people. I think one of them being the one that makes the most sense of why a game studio would do it is that they make mechanical changes.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't, to where it's so mechanically different that it feels like it's a completely different game with the same like shell on top of it.
I'm going to throw out my working example. Final Fantasy VII, as a 10-year-old, my favorite game. When they remade it entirely, it's literally a different genre of game. It is not a turn-based RPG. It's
I am going
live
to
action.
defend this game once again to you.
What? You can't defend Seven.
Listen, I didn't,
You didn't even play the original.
OG. First of all,
Where are
I
my
know the
nerd
story.
glasses?
Okay, I know the story is they did something entirely different. But you always bring up that it's not turn based. There is an option to turn based on.
Not by default.
Not by default because the normal person doesn't like it. But
that was a
for
category
you-
that the game was in, which is why I mentioned that
Yeah.
you can change a game mechanically, but it can technically change the game itself. Because if you're used to that type of game, and then they change that mechanic of it, you're technically changing the game. Because like if I like a football game, and then you turn it into a soccer game, but you still have the same everything else, it's not the same game.
So
Like,
this comparison is obviously
I
silly, but it
mean-
is
it's
kind
drastic,
of-
but
Yeah,
football
let's
is
go with-
football. Let me just say.
yeah. But
Joe, you
That's-
mentioned one. You
For-
mentioned Halo earlier, and I also mentioned Kingdom Hearts to kind of solidify the point and be slightly less silly because we have brought up legit examples, right? Halo was a first-person shooter RPG, and for sure that and Kingdom Hearts was an RPG. Their derivative works are entirely different genre of games. And if they weren't titled the same, there is a 0% chance that there's a very low percent chance that as many people would have played those games. It was just a marketing ploy. They're not the same game or type of game.
I actually distinctly remember when I was younger, I went and bought a Kingdom Hearts game because I saw it was Kingdom Hearts, and it was for my, I think, DS or whatever it is, my handheld console. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I love Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Like, I'm going to be able to play another game. It was a card game.
Right?
Those are the worst. That's a category I can't play it. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I cannot do it.
What about you, audience?
Mind blown. Yeah.
That is one category. No, that is the hill that I will like just stand there. Nope. I'll be that little kid. I don't read it.
See, I don't know.
Broccoli's
If I know
gross.
it's a card game when I'm going in, like for instance, I have played not a lot, but I have played some of the Yu-Gi-Oh games because I like Yu-Gi-Oh, like the OG Yu-Gi-Oh. Don't get me started on some of the newer ones, but like the OG.
I mean, I grew up
Yami
with
and
Magic
Yugi.
the Gathering and Pokemon, so it's like the in-person playing of card games. I get it. I think it's a different experience altogether. It's the same as D&D in a way.
Mine
Again,
isn't.
don't shoot me. Like I understand that card games and D&D are completely different animals, but I'm just saying as an in-person experience,
Yeah.
I think that adds to that game or
Yes.
that game type. So to like try to do that on a system or a gaming, my mind can't do it. Like I cannot do it.
I understand that grandmasters play chess on computers, but I get the feeling that most of them probably like the in-person chess. There's just like an aesthetic about it.
That's a game I need to try and fail at.
Chess? Chess is
I
a
don't know
memory
how to
game.
play chess.
Yeah, you have to remember based on what someone else does, what can come from that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
essentially, that's how you make your moves.
bad players just don't know how to play.
That's me.
Mediocre beginner players that aren't very good know how to play with the units, but they don't know any of the strategies or the history. You know what? I'm not going to talk about chess right now. I am not ranked.
She hit a note. She hit a note.
No,
Different form of gaming we're about to talk about.
it is gaming. No. So, what have I done?
But the other
But-
point that I was trying to make
Yeah.
earlier, because again, I said there was 2 points. It was one, again, you change the game mechanically.
Mm.
The other being that you go so far off base from story that you
Yeah.
change the experience of a game.
Right, like game 2 totally retcons
Yeah.
something amazing about game 1, and you're just like,
And I mean, that's a big issue with Marvel and even in movies, and especially with Star Wars content. And their community will jump on you quicker than anybody because they make these little subtle changes to the not overarching, but the world that they built
yes.
and that they've had established through the years. And then they go back with these newer things and they completely wipe out what people absolutely loved. And I'm saying that because, like, if you look at the 2 figures behind me, these are 2 figures that came from the books or Star Wars as their stories developed. But in their newer content, they completely changed these 2 characters to where people are like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And even their newest show that they just finished this week called The Acolyte, sorry, they completely changed 2 or 3 main characters by adding them into this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with games, they have a nasty habit of doing that. And that's where people with Halo, especially Gears of War, and that's why I said I was happy with Gears that they're going back and making it a prequel type game instead of just continuing down this rabbit hole of
Yeah.
wherever.
I don't want to keep using the exact same examples, but they're the ones that front of mind, right? Like Final Fantasy, even 7, it's the same game. And because of all the little franchises that have spawned off of it, what do they call it? Canon lore
Yeah.
is not the same based on whoever played whichever version of it. And as someone old enough to remember the original, I'm like, yeah, spoiler alert, somebody dies.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal.
With Final Fantasy, though, I will say they do a fantastic job of making each game its own thing. So Final Fantasy is still like the OG game, right? Like it's changed. It's one of those games that has different genres throughout time. So like I played a Pokemon version of Final Fantasy called World of Final Fantasy, where you go out and you catch little critters and they fight with you. We've played Final Fantasy 7. I have not played that. You guys have. And then Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 14. And every single one of these versions of Final Fantasy is completely different. But the cool thing that I like about them is that it ties in all the monsters and like some bits
right?
of the lore. So like, we know Shiva's going to be a summon. We know Ifrit's going to be a summon. Like we know those things, but they change how these things are used or whatever in a way that they've been able to be on, what is it, Final Fantasy? What was the last one that came out? 16?
16, I think.
16, yeah, because you don't like 15, so 16.
Mm.
So,
But I think that's slightly different because it's I'm trying to think of the way to put it. But I think we're saying it, me and Mav are saying it in a way where they change a set story.
yeah.
So
Right.
when he's mentioning Final Fantasy VII, it's because the newer version of it is different than the original.
Right. Not like Final Fantasy VIII is different from 7, right? We're talking about they're releasing a new game that is using the old title. So Final Fantasy is a gray area for anyone that's not familiar with the franchise because you have to repeat the name and they're technically different. So I like the Halo example. I like the Kingdom Hearts examples, right? These games came out. They're the same setting. Each game that came out is a different game, but a lot of them are too different.
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3.
Which didn't come out as 1, 2, and 3.
No.
Right? They came out 1 plus 15 other little minis, 2 plus 15 other little minis, and then I don't know what's been out since 3 came out.
I don't think anything.
I don't know that they've made anything too recent as far as Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Octopath here's a common trend that kind of goes in with this topic. So question for everybody is, do you like your tea the same way every day, right? But a common trend in the gaming industry right now is any massively successful game that starts to become less popular over time, usually just because it's been out for so long, right? You can't keep something in the news forever. They're doing a lot of spin-offs of those, especially if they're like RPG single player games, into the gacha realm. So Final Fantasy has a gacha. Octopath Traveler, that was a very popular on the Switch type game. It has a gacha game now called Champions of the Continent or something like that, but it's still Octopath Traveler. There are more examples I'm sure I could think of if I thought hard enough, but that seems to be a trend. Like if your game is well liked but no longer in the news, let's cash cow it even more.
Call of Duty has a mobile app. Apex had a mobile app for like a month.
Diablo was another one, yeah.
Right. So
a lot of them.
The cash cow syndrome seems to be, if you make it as a game and you're not going to be making another huge title in your series, then you're at risk, very likely, to be making some sort of cash grab derivative of your game.
But I think I don't. Go ahead with your point. I'll think of what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be hard for some people that maybe grew up in the more modern times, because a lot of modern famous games are live service games to begin with. So it's harder to detect that like shift towards money grabbing, because everything is already money grabbing, right? Like Fortnite, I'm sure there are children that are 5 or 6 that are playing Fortnite, and that is their first real experience with gaming. So their out the box is going to be, oh, well, this is a game, and of course you can pay thousands of dollars if you really want to. Like, that's normal, right? Because that's their first exposure.
That's when you see a lot of parents coming into when I used to work at GameStop. They would come in and buy the Fortnite cards or the Roblox cards or whatever for their kids. It's so wild to me, because like thinking back, my first game was that I can remember, right, was Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this out there in case my pops ever listens to this podcast. You had it easy, sir. You just had to buy a game, and that was it. It was done.
The most we had was expansion packs, and then those were they kind of finished their story if they felt like they left something open, and that was their way to continue their game. And there was a considerable amount of time between when you got the game and then when you generally got an expansion. As time went on, they shortened that window quite a bit to where you'd get a game and then within 6 months you got an expansion pack. But I remember being a kid, and I'll use StarCraft as an example, is it felt like there was probably more than a year or 2 worth of time before you got a considerable expansion pack. But you were still playing the game, and then that's how they kind of like drawed you back in, is they add in a new Diablo. They'd add in a new class. And then they'd add in a new like map area, and then that's how they kept doing it. But I felt like that was more rewarding than the current system, and it's hard to not say microtransaction as a part of that, because that is the current system. And my brother mentioned these kids don't know the difference. They see Battle Pass, they see this, that, and I think the Battle Pass system is really, really, and I'm trying to figure out the nicest way to say this.
Predatory.
It's killing games, and I'm saying like high end games. Call of Duty being the best example of it, because that's been around forever. That series has been around for more than 10 years, and it is a complete cash grab. every year. You know for a fact it's going to have a new iteration every year. And what bothered me is you'd look at the new version, and then in my mind, when you get a new version of a game, it's supposed to look better, feel better. Like everything is supposed to be a step up. You get these new games and you're paying $60, $70 for it. You get it, you turn it on, and you're like, this is the same thing.
You know what people are buying the new Call of Duties for? For the what perks and stuff there is for the Battle Royale.
Yeah.
They're spending $60-$70
But
for
it
the Battle
backfired on
Royale.
them because the newest version of Call of Duty, none of their stuff ports over. None of it. Everything is brand new, starting fresh. None of your skins, none of it.
So you touched on something positive, which is the what do you expect from a title's new iteration? What do you want to see, right? And so for most of us, it's better graphics is always great. And if it's 2D, I want you to use that pencil and pen harder. I don't know. Like, oh, that sounded weird. What I mean is, like, graphics can't really get too much. Resolution can improve, right, in 2D games and stuff like that. Fair enough. Animation complexity can increase, right? A simple jump can then have like a whoosh effect and all this other stuff. Like you can always make it look fancier. There, you can always add more drip. So graphics, performance, many games are not like we like to think, oh, I had fun with that game. You don't think about the performance until you see better or worse. And once you've seen either, you're like, oh, okay, performance is a difference, right? Kind of like when we used to play Genshin and we stopped using the PS4 and we went to a PS5, and then suddenly the loading screen didn't take a minute.
Yeah.
You were like, oh.
Could no longer watch a full TikTok. Could only watch the beginning of one.
Right. And so performance, graphics, Joe, you might have mentioned something else, but those two I know you did.
I think it was just mechanics. Sometimes they improve them.
Right.
Things like that.
So improving on the systems that already exist is what I'm hearing, right? Take everything you have and make that stuff better. Yeah. That's what I want to see in the newest thing for something I like already.
So the two things I want, make it better and add new things for me. Like,
so you want both worlds.
Yeah, but I don't mean, okay, so like for instance, let's take a game that I play, right? So something like Final Fantasy 14, because that's my current game. You take that game, you add to it, right? So I still have my baseline character. My healer class still does the same things. Just add an extra ability or two, right? And then, with this new expansion, it's exactly what Final Fantasy did with this expansion. Create new enemies that are different, but do relatively the same thing, but not the same thing.
I think
that's
that
what
all falls into category one. I want the same stuff. I just want more of the good stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas when we started the conversation, you could have legit been like, all right, the game itself is changing. You no longer fly on a mount, right? Now you swim through the air. That's a weird example. But like,
I just swim through the
air. Okay.
He's a flying fish.
I haven't had enough.
Why couldn't you say like drive a tank or something?
I think it's because it's the time warning. That's why his brain's just like, we're going to fly, swim.
I was making a point. I'm sure it's over there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's swimming away in the sky.
So there were questions I wanted to make sure we asked, and those are gone too. So
I think we got some pretty good questions for our listeners to discuss with us. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you again for joining us at Wow.
It's one of those days, guys. It's just one of those days. It's
It
okay.
really is. So thank you again for joining us. We are gaming at the round table.
Yes.
That's
Almost.
Maverick.
Almost.
Jojo, and I'm Crystal. Thank you and bye.
Have a good one.
See ya.